Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home. Welcome everybody to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. It is a great day to be alive, and it's a great year to be alive. I'm super psyched about this year and all the good things that are coming our way. I want to invite you first, before we get into my awesome guest and talking to him, I want to invite you to the Heal Your Hunger Tribe, which is a Facebook group specifically for those of you who are super excited about overcoming emotional eating and want support in that way. I offer a great weekly Facebook Live called Transformation Tuesdays, and I have guest speakers now and then, and some prizes and just little goodies for you. So jump on over to the Heal Your Hunger Tribe on Facebook, and let's continue the conversation there. Please post about the podcast and how you enjoyed it, what questions you might have, and let's stay in touch. Now, I am so excited about our guest today. Awesome guy. I mean, I could talk all day long about him just as a person because I adore him so much. But I'll stick with right now with the very important credentials of why he's the person to listen to. First, Alan, since I'm talking about you, hello.
Hey, Tricia.
Okay, just sit there while I just rave about you for a little bit. Dr. Alan is a naturopathic endocrinologist who focuses on thyroid function, adrenal health, and metabolism. And he practices in Scottsdale, this beautiful, Scottsdale's beautiful. And then if you follow him at all, you know how beautiful his home is as well, his new home. So he's a New York Times bestselling author whose books include The Metabolism Reset Diet, The Adrenal Reset Diet, and The Complete Idiot's Guide to Thyroid Disease. And that is the truth. Dr. C is like the go-to guy for really managing your thyroid and having thyroid health. So he appears regularly on national media like Dr. Oz, The Doctors, and the Today Show. And again, welcome, Dr. C. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Tricia. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're just a great guy, and I adore your wife. You know that. Okay, so I'm really psyched. You know, I know you've been working really hard on your new book, The Metabolism Reset Diet, and I just want to first say congratulations. Like, it's just sounds like such an important piece of work, and will help so many people. I want to know first, how did this topic pique your interest and become something that you really are passionate about?
You know, it's been a topic of interest just my whole life, personally and professionally. It was one of my biggest struggles was with weight early on, and that resurfaced at several points during adulthood as well. So I completely get that firsthand. And, you know, working with people for last 23 years as a doctor, I saw that's been like one of the biggest concerns as well. So we've always tried to figure out ways in which people didn't have to just like starve and suffer and try harder, but how the body could really change in ways that they could just naturally stay at a size they were comfortable with and have it all work out better.
That's awesome. Now, you know, I forget at times that you started out struggling with your weight because you're so fit and you're so athletic. And, you know, like people say to me, gosh, I would never know you were 50 pounds overweight. And so I want to just explore that a little bit with you and your background of struggling with your weight.
Yeah. Every time I even just think about it or talk about it, I still feel the emotional power behind all of that. And it really hit me in adolescence. I had seizures, I had complications from cerebral palsy. And, you know, I don't know if it was the inactivity from that or what it was, but I really found that I could change my mood with food.
Yep. Works really fast, doesn't it?
I actually remember the time that the light bulb went off. I was walking around our yard and I just snuck a bunch of cookies. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I was like 6, 7 years old. And yeah, things went downhill. But as an adolescent, it really came to a head when I felt the social rejection that came from that. And at the time, you know, by today's standards, I wouldn't have been too unusual. But back then, I was much more of an outlier. You know, it was less common. And yeah, just the sting of being an outcast and feeling like your body rejected you and And that was a time in which that social world just meant everything. It was just kind of coming to the forefront as far as its relevance. So I remember just the desperation and the eagerness to change that, and putting forth efforts in ways that didn't work. One thought I had, because I hadn't ever done anything physical, and I thought, well, I'm just going to be a football player, because the football players they're popular and they're fit, and so I'll sign up for football, right? So I get this gear to wear, and I didn't really know what to do with it. It took me a long time to put the pads and get all the stuff in the right place. And so then I come trotting out, and the coach is yelling at me because I'm late for practice. Now everyone else is already lined up. So come on, get out. And so I'm running across the field to get to practice. I blacked out on my way to the first practice session. That's
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's how unrealistic the goal was of just signing up for football and just playing. So people that have had to take baby steps, I get it. I completely understand that. And yeah, but again, just such a powerful thing. And so much gets wrapped up into this about our self-worth and how we're perceived socially and how we feel about our physical incarnation, our very bodies, how we connect with that. So many things get tied up into this.
Yeah, no question about it. And we do have crazy thoughts around, the desperation of how do I get this weight off? I mean, I had fantasies about joining the army where I'd be forced to exercise at boot camp, So it's like you just go to those really crazy places because you're like, what do I do about this thing? So I really relate to that. So tell us about what Metabolism Reset is really about.
So the thing was, I think there's no shortage of advice on different ways you can starve yourself, right? And most people have tried a lot of ways. And I think they've seen a really similar pattern that if they toe the line closely enough and cut out some big food group or some big groups of food categories, that sure, they can see the scale move maybe a bit, often less than they would expect, but they don't feel well during the process. And then afterward, they regain and probably regain even more. And it's just happened over and over again. So what I realized is that we're always having to manage our fuel in some way. And that's what the metabolism is doing. Like right now we're talking and, I can see that you're not eating and I'm not eating, but we're burning energy. So our body has some way of storing fuel and then doling that out later on when we need it. We all do that. And when we do eat, we're not burning all that energy in that instant we're swallowing our food. Right? So we've got some means of balancing that, but it could work better or worse. There's a small group of people, probably about 7-8%, that eat what they wish and move as they feel suited to do so, and they've got a healthy body weight and a healthy body composition. They are by far the minority. But that's really what a healthy metabolism should look like. So for the rest of us that had to struggle and sort it out, it isn't that we've done the wrong strategies or not tried hard enough. It's that our body isn't sorting that out right. We should be able to harmlessly store extra food for later and not have that translate into major weight gain. And if our food intake is ever lower, we should be able to easily pull out of storage and just keep our energy levels going and not feel crashed and not have cravings. That's what it's supposed to be like.
Okay, so do people are we born with different, like is a slow metabolism, I mean, is that a hereditary thing?
For sure, there's relevance of genetics and a lot of factors. The exciting part is that the parts that we can't change make up a pretty small bit of it.
Okay.
Genetics contribute and they influence, but by no means are they destiny.
Okay.
And probably the biggest single factor that governs metabolic rate is thyroid function. And same thing, that's off for a big chunk of people, but that can improve, that can get better.
What function did you say?
Thyroid function.
Thyroid, okay. Because I always feel like, my personal experience and what I've observed in other people is that, definitely if you have parents who were overweight or had a tendency to be overweight, like I did. Both my parents were overweight growing up, and then they got thinner in their adulthood. But I find that people who do have the tendency to gain weight easily have offspring who have a tendency to gain weight easily, because
Sure.
that was certainly the case for me. But you're saying even if you have that tendency, even if it is, if you're genetically predisposed, you can offset that. There's a way to work, against that.
There sure is. And in terms of the prevalence and how common the genes are amongst modern adults, that genes that are predisposed to weight gain, how much those genes are in the population, it's the majority of people. And we think about this from an evolutionary perspective. If we had ancestors whose bodies didn't save energy well and didn't get the food when they could, they would not have made it through the various times of famine, and we would not be their offspring. So there are ways in which some are more predisposed than others, but really everyone's got this to some degree. We've all got some proclivity towards those directions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So tell me about why, when people are, obviously there's a lot out there right now about different ways to reset your metabolism, like the keto diet, the intermittent fasting, this kind of thing. That's kind of the newer way. Calorie restriction has always been a dieting hack, or people think it's a hack. It doesn't work, but it's, they think it's a hack. So how have we evolved in our understanding of metabolism and how it can be reset?
Well, so there's a lot of ways that for sure people can see short-term weight loss. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that a lot of the popular diets now, like the ones you mentioned, the keto, intermittent fasting, they're honestly not different than caloric restriction. So whenever there's studies done on them, they'll look at how much weight was lost in someone who was on a keto diet. And if they had a caloric deficit that was, whatever weight they would have lost from a deficit of 750 calories, if they had a calorie deficit of that much, that's what weight they would have lost. And for some people, there's a lot of ways out there, and there certainly are many cases where someone has stumbled upon something that just works for them and just lights them up. And if they've had lasting, sustained weight loss and healthy body composition after keto, that's awesome. Same thing about intermittent fasting. But so far, what I'm also trying to figure out is what's going to work most consistently for the largest number of people over the long term. And yeah, those approaches, it seems that the weight loss is proportionate to how much less food they eat. And the real, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, this is kind of surprising to me. I thought there was some other thing that happened when people do, the ketone, I can't explain it because I'm not, I'm not scientifically inclined, but the idea, I didn't think of it as literally, this is just another form of calorie restriction. I didn't know that was really why, like the fundamental bottom line of why those things were working.
It really is. And the keto diet, it's been thought that there may be some suppression of appetite, and that might make it easier for some people. But the drawback is there's also a big suppression of metabolism. So the one thing we know about ketogenic diets, as far as them being helpful, are that they do help some kids with seizures who do not respond to medications. And I can pretty much see out my window where that work comes from. It's Barrows Neurologic Center in downtown Phoenix, like right down the road. I know these people. And the drawback, they don't use this as a first-line approach for these kids. The diet's tricky, obviously, but the big drawback, kids don't get thyroid disease often. It's much more common in adults. And even epileptic kids don't get thyroid disease. It's only a few per thousand. But when they're on ketogenic diets, about 23% need thyroid medication because their thyroids are harmed so badly. So it suppresses the metabolic rate severely. One of the biggest studies on adults, it was a controlled study. They had a group of young men that they were in a metabolic ward, so all their food was measured. And one group got a 2,700 calorie ketogenic diet. The other group got a 2,700 calorie total crap diet. I mean, this was like set up to be a bad diet. It was half processed carbohydrate and a quarter sugar, but it was the same calorie load. And the researchers, they wanted to see if there was some metabolic advantage to a ketogenic diet. That was their whole goal. And when it was all over, there was more fat loss in the people on the processed carbohydrate diet when it was the same calorie load than there was on the ketogenic diet. So,
wow.
Yeah. So in the book, I talk a lot about the concept of fuel, and protein is different, because it's really not, I don't even focus on weight loss. Mm-hmm. I think more about waste loss. and about improving body composition for being what matters. And with that goal in mind, suddenly calories are not all equal. Protein's different, but fats, carbs, ketones, even alcohol, they're all versions of fuel. And when you're talking about how they act in your liver, they all break down to the same thing called oxaloacetate. They're all made of the same building blocks. So it's not really relevant about carbs, fats, ketones, which one's good, which one's bad. It's just really about the total fuel load that's relevant.
Okay, so let's get into more specifically. This is really, you're focusing on the liver here as being the most instrumental in our metabolism.
Yeah. When I mentioned before about your body being able to store fuel in a harmless way and then let it out later on, that's really the liver. It's got a place for triglycerides and a place for glycogen. You can make glycogen only out of carbs. You can make triglycerides out of anything, carbs, fats, or ketones. And the pitfall we get into is we run out of room for glycogen. We get too much triglyceride. So there's a medical disease called fatty liver syndrome, but even short of that, most everyone that has struggles with metabolism, they've got too much triglyceride trapped inside their liver, and that's what slows things down.
Okay. And so what do we do about that?
Well, the trick is you want your liver to have a holiday so it can burn some of its own fuel. And you want it to have some building blocks so it can get rid of all the junk trapped inside of it. But along the way, you still need to get enough nutrients and enough protein to maintain lean body mass. So that's what the reset is all about. And it's not, here's the rules you follow for the rest of your life. Because what I've really come to think is that people like, your followers, they know that broccoli's better than French fries. They know this stuff better than most people do.
Tell me something I don't know.
Exactly. And they, by and large, they do that stuff on most days too. They do it well enough. I really believe that. So my goal is to think about a way in which your body can transform so your efforts pay off long term. So you don't need to do something strict and weird and standing on your head upside down, forever. You flip the switch so that your reasonable efforts then give you the results you should get from them.
Yeah, no, it's this whole dieting mentality is so crazy and so destructive. I mean, we need a solution long term. Obviously, stopping emotional eating is key, but I love this as really helping your body work better long term. So what's the most important part of this?
Well, there's a couple parts that work together, one of which is doing a brief period of time in which there's enough protein but less fuel. Here's a weird thing. I encourage almost no exercise during this reset process, very little.
Okay.
So,
that makes sense. That's great. I mean, I want to hear more about why, but for emotional eaters who have have a bad relationship with exercise, an unhealthy relationship with exercise, I think that's great. So let's hear more.
It can be the idea of trying to exercise your way out of a bad situation just doesn't work. When you're healthy, it's something you can do for enjoyment and have fun with. But during stages of rapid change for the body, it's one more level of stress and trauma, and it makes things more difficult to stick with. Most people get more of an amplified appetite than they get reduction in size from exercise. So, yeah, it's great to maintain the successful weight loss long term, but it's not great to initiate it in the short term. And it's also not great for those where the real goal is waist loss. We want to see waist loss.
Okay, and by waist, you're talking literally about my middle, right?
I've just dug so hard to figure out what are the easiest ways to predict long-term health and what's the best way to know that what you're doing is moving you in the right direction. And the simplest thing that I found, which has the most predictive value, is your height to waist ratio.
Okay.
And this is just drop dead easy. The magic number is half. So you want the circumference around your belly button in the morning when you're resting. And normally we hold it in, but when you're not holding it in and just resting in the morning, first thing, you want that circumference to be less than half of your height. It's that easy. And when it's above half the height, that's the biggest risk for just everything bad. Just before we got on this call, I was looking at a paper that just came out, and it said that your waist circumference relative to your height is now one of the strongest predictors of brain shrinkage with aging. So the bigger the waist, the smaller your brain. It's just one more thing that tied into that. but risk for heart disease, cancers, diabetes, premature mortality, they're all more strongly linked to height to weight ratio than they are to almost anything you could imagine.
But just less than half is still pretty overweight, isn't it?
So there's different thresholds, but above half we see clear risks. That's where there's clear risks that show up. People can be 0.4, 0.35 is pretty lean. Mm-hmm. So yeah, half to 0.4 is a healthy range. Half is definitely a range of danger.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so how do we are we talking about like getting our livers healthy? Is that kind of like a way to sort of sum up what you're talking, not sum it up, but that's really what you're talking about, is really getting a healthier liver, which is going to directly impact your metabolism.
It is, and it's got to be done in a good way. There's a lot of ways that you can do cleanses or detox and just make your liver frazzled and just get it stressed out or more thrown off. Mm-hmm. So the trick is to really get it. There's a couple of core issues. There's the toxic fat that gets stuck inside the cells. There's toxic fat around the cells. And then there's the timing, the ratio of a couple of the main liver pathways, phase 1 and phase 2. So the goal is to fix all of those things. Mm-hmm. And in terms of that toxic fat, we've heard a lot about belly fat and the dangers of it. And what we haven't heard about is there's a different thing called organ fat. So there's a kind of fat that builds up in the liver and the pancreas. And all the bad things about belly fat, seriously, like times 50 for organ fat. A paperclip is about 1 gram. And if you take a type 2 diabetic and you can do a regime to pull out 2 grams of fat from their pancreas, like 2 paperclips worth, they're now non-diabetic.
Wow.
So that's what a big deal organ fat is. And to be really precise, that's what this targets, is the fat inside the organs.
Okay. Interesting. That's really cool. And it's not just the liver, though. You're talking about other organs as well?
Well, to be really precise, for savvy listeners, this is really about the liver, the pancreas, and the skeletal muscle. So there's a thing called intermuscular adipose tissue. And what I said about the liver being a place to store fuel, it's all true. The muscles help a lot. The muscles are part of that also. So when the muscles in the liver have more room to store fuel, because that's how, when you eat, because you remember, I just had lunch 15 minutes ago, and I'm not going to burn all that lunch right now. So it's going to store. And if things work right, my liver, my muscles can hold on to that. And if things don't work right, that gets sent straight away into toxic fat in the liver, or belly fat, or subcutaneous fat. And those are versions that I can't tap into later on when I need them. Another hour or two, I'll be after a meal, I'll need to draw from storage to keep my blood sugar, my energy up again. So when those things work well, they'll just pull it out of the liver and the muscles, and it'll be working fine. Okay.
But you wouldn't consider this like a detox. That's a different, like a liver detox. Is that separate, or is that sort of cousin to what you're talking about?
The funny thing is that there's nothing more harmful to your liver than the extra fat inside of it. And in getting that out, you also reduce a lot of more classic things we think about detoxing from, like wastes from environmental chemicals or old medications or whatnot. But the bizarre thing is that our cells, the biggest stressor they face is creating energy. Think about a car. A car, assuming that you didn't have fluids that would go bad, it wouldn't wear out if it sat in the garage. So we only wear out by generating energy. And what's happening when we have things like visceral fat and insulin resistance, it's the body having nowhere to do with, no place to put that energy. You've got this fuel, but you can't use it. You can't burn it properly. So you've got to stick it somewhere. You can't make it disappear. So I imagine like an airport and like all these big jets, but the runway's closed. So they're also like staying in circulation. So that's high triglycerides in the blood. That's high blood sugar. That's even high ketones. That's high cholesterol. That's all energy that's floating around. And because you can't use it, it hurts your system. It damages the cells and it breaks everything down over time. So the body intentionally keeps that out, because if it got into the cells and there's too much, they would die on the spot. You would just fry your mitochondria. So we intentionally keep that out because that's not quite as bad, but that's where all the harm comes in from.
And if somebody is is this, I mean, you call it the Metabolism Reset Diet, so it's very obviously food specific. If somebody's doing this and they are burning that fat, or using that energy, if you will, is there a change in their energy, I would imagine, as well?
So that's the other side of the coin, and that's an awesome question. So when the fuel can't be used, so the problem is it's stuck, and it's physically stuck, and it's stored, and there's the harm from that. But the other part is the fuel's not being used. So the brain, the muscles, they're not getting to burn energy properly. So that comes back again, and that's the exciting part. I think about waist size and appetite and energy, like those three variables. I never really mastered the Rubik's Cube. You get to like one color's where you want, and then now you turn it, now that one's gone again. Yeah. So I think that's what people struggle with like waist, energy, and appetite. You can starve yourself and you can change things a bit, but your energy and appetite aren't where you want them to be. Or some people could just focus on eating healthy and not worrying about the details, and maybe their energy and appetite are under control, but their waist hasn't changed. So this is how all those things line up again together.
Interesting. That's great. So talk to me about how you get people started on this diet.
It's a really easy thing. I've structured it to where there's not a lot of moving parts and not a lot of things to think about. And I've put a lot of time trying to figure out, what makes programs successful, for people, easy to do. And one of the biggest ones is this idea of decision fatigue, not a lot of choices to make. So from the get-go, we make it clear that this is finite. This is not the plan to live your life. This is to get a job done and to be finished with it for 28 days. And so I set it up to where there's 2 shakes, an evening meal, and unlimited snack options. So the mainstay of it is really those 2 shakes and that one meal. And in the first bit, when someone's transitioning into it, they may find themselves just munchy or feeling hungry, and so they've got unlimited snack options to fall back on.
Is there a way to make this, because I have something in my program I call 3 meal magic for emotional eaters, sticking to 3 meals, just because it kind of, again, takes that decision making out. Is there a way to make this more meal, kind of put your shakes in meal compartments?
For sure. That's exactly how to think of it. Yeah, like set times of day. And the perk about shakes is just that during this time frame, the goal is to have really low fuel and then a quality amount of protein for the liver. And I wanted that to happen in a way that didn't create a lot of acid burden. So when people do this, it's a crazy thing, but weight loss is often nice, and often we see impressive numbers, but we see spectacular numbers about waist loss. So we'll commonly see 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of waist loss over the course of the 28 days. And because of all that toxic fat that's leaving the body, the downside is that if the person had a big burden of acid to process, they've got a greater risk for forming gallstones and kidney stones and gout in that acute stage. So because of the rapid fat loss, the rapid loss of toxic fat, I wanted to use more alkaline ingredients. And that got to be at odds with a lot of protein sources. If you were to do seafood or poultry or beef in high amounts, you'd be raising the acid load. So I relied heavily on vegetable protein to keep the acid load lower, but still keep that protein intake high enough to maintain healthy body mass.
Okay. Is it completely vegetarian, or is there some meat in it?
It's done, you can do it both ways. Okay. So the shakes themselves really are vegan. The recipes I suggest are vegan. And the evening meal, you can do vegan, paleo, AIP, you can do that however you like.
Interesting. Well, that sounds really easy to follow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if people want to do this and they want to get a healthier liver and get a smaller waist and all the good things that you're talking about, how do they get started with that?
You'll have a link you can share with your followers, and what we're doing is a free week trial of the 28-day program. So if anyone wants to see if this makes sense for them, they can just try it out and see how they do after those first few days. And if it's a good fit, they're welcome to pursue the rest and make that transformation. So that's the easiest thing, just no risk, easy challenge, and try it out.
Okay, guys, so when you're listening, what you need to do is go to the show notes and get this free trial. I love that. It's like, try it out, see if it works for you, and dip your toe in and see how you feel. So Dr. Allen, I just adore you, and I love how thorough you are in your research and the work that you do. You're so, you leave no stone unturned, and you're really, careful. And I say careful meaning you put a lot of care in what you do and really making sure it's for the highest and best good of your patients and all the people who follow your work. So I just want to thank you for that. I think that is so beautiful, and you're a trusted source for sure for healthy advice on metabolism and thyroid and everything else that you put out there in the world. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. And then I have a question to part with, and that is that I ask all my guests, so long as I remember, and that is, what is your, because this is the Heal Your Hunger show, what is your deepest hunger?
My deepest hunger, the thing that I learned, it was kind of an odd thing, but from early along, from having the experience about overcoming a lot of health challenges and learning things that helped me do that, I realized that the biggest joy was really to help others make that journey and just help them have that happen easier, and I almost feel selfish in some ways, because I realized that people always think about what it means to have a good life by our cultural values. People think about like having all the riches or the mates or the recreation or whatnot. And I don't know, I realized early along that those really weren't the highest satisfactions. They weren't going to be the most fun things to pursue. That really just understand how to close that gap between someone's current health and where they want it to be and move along that journey, that was like the coolest thing. So that's my hunger, is to keep on figuring out how to do that better and better and to reach more people along the way.
Well, you're doing a good job of it. So thank you so much. That's so beautiful. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And please join us. Comment on this show over at the Heal Your Hunger Tribe on Facebook, please. So thanks so much. It's just such a pleasure to have you.
Oh, it's good to see you, Tricia. Thanks for your work, too. This is a hugely needed thing that you do, because, like I mentioned, our feelings get so tied up in this and become such a spiral. So it's awesome that you can help untangle and make sense of that for people.
Thank you so much. Many blessings to you.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to get free support, insider health info, exclusive invites to events, and more, visit healyourhunger.com.